Trevor, what do you think, man? If you let's break down the game everybody's talking about, right? Michigan, Ohio State. Very rarely do we get the situation that they're in right now. Um, what do you think of the game? And regardless of type of game, call it a 1-point game, double overtime thriller, call it a 20-point blowout. Do you think it matters for the loser to still have a seat at the table, assuming TCU wins, assuming SC wins their championship as well?
Assuming those things, there's just not enough seats at the table, in my opinion. Could things happen? And of course, that we're here at the end. We're the last week of the regular season, and there's still so much that can happen to make this top 4, top 6, even top 8 look drastically different. An interesting scenario here would be, okay, let's say Ohio State beats Michigan for the sake of the scenario. And then so happens on the day of the Big Ten championship that Ohio State loses to whoever's the West representative, right? I mean, that's a scenario. Not going to happen, most likely. But could
be freaking nuts.
So it's an interesting way to look at things. I think that they should treat this game this weekend as if it's their conference championship, because it is for the most part. The winner of this game can walk into the conference championship with a lot of confidence, knowing if they win, they will be going to college football playoff. The other, it's hard pressed to think that they'll have a seat at the table at this point.
Okay, so Clint, what do you think about this game, man?
I think it's an elimination game. Mm-hmm. I mean, we can talk it in circles all we want. If one of those teams doesn't go to the championship game and they've got one loss, they shouldn't be in the rest of the body of work should not get them into the college football playoffs. Now, we can sit here and play the if game. Well, if this team loses, if that team loses, and create a scenario where they do get in. But for me, y'all know, we know where I sit. I mean, I feel like I'm kind of on an island by myself when it comes to
I'm with you on that island. I know where you're going.
I mean, I just don't see, I think Michigan is one of the more like obvious with the quarterback situation. Young quarterback, can he put the team on his back and win a monster game? And so it's easy for folks to talk about Michigan and the quarterback situation because he's a young quarterback and he's the wild card. Ohio State, I mean, I've watched games. I've watched more Ohio State football games this year than I ever have in my life because of my Twitter battles that I get into. And I'm just telling you that they are a top 4 football team. Assuming they don't lose, they should be in the college football playoffs. But they are far from the team that I watch on film and I go, it don't matter that their schedule is this. It doesn't matter how they played against this team. It doesn't matter what they did here. Boy, the eye test, man. They and the history of that Buckeye. Like, I just can't go there with them. I think this is. I think Georgia's the only team in America right now that I think I've watched them week in, week out, and I'm just convinced that what they put on tape is the best team in America and should play in a college football playoff. This is an elimination game for me, guys.
Okay, so Hack, what's gonna allow one team or the other? Where do you lean as we get into the middle of the week?
So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go on a limb here, and I'm gonna disagree with Clint. I think that this is Ohio State's year. With the way that the college football playoffs laid out, I think for Ryan Day, he's and I also have some personal experience with this program and how they run things. And I think Ryan Day's done a good job of continuing that. I think that of any year, and I'm not saying that, it's hard to make the statement I'm saying, but I think if Ohio State's going to win a national championship, it's going to be this year. And there's a few reasons I say that. I think that offensively, they're a top 20 rushing attack. They're actually averaging more yards per carry than Michigan is. Defensively, they're a top 10 defense in total defense. Offensively, they're a top 10 offense in total offense. Georgia's 28 in total rushing offense, which is something that'll throw you off a little bit. I think that they can match up and present issues. Obviously, I think that some players are going to have to play better than they have up until this point throughout the year. But this Ohio State team has a propensity to peak at the right times, and I think that this game's coming at the perfect time for them because They're bitter as shit. They got showed up. They got showed up by Michigan last year. I think they had some gaps on the defensive side of the ball that they've clearly fixed this year. And if Michigan can come, or if Ohio State can come out here and beat Michigan by 2 scores, they're going to head into this thing with a lot of confidence, and a confident Ohio State team. It's as talented a roster as anybody has in the country. And I have a lot of confidence in Ryan Day's ability to put this team in really good situations, especially with some extended time to prepare. And I think that they're dangerous. They have some guys who haven't played much in Jackson Smith and Jigba, and I would assume that if they're making a national championship run, that he's going to try and get healthy and get on the field. That's another element that you're going to have to prepare for. And similar to USC, I think they're USC with a defense and a little bit more physicality on both sides of the ball. And I think that that's where the combination of physicality, defense, and that air raid explosiveness kind of plays into it, that maybe they may have even more than Georgia does, which is going to be really interesting. I still think that Georgia, I agree with you, Clint. I think when you watch the tape, Georgia, from a consistency standpoint, has done it. This is more of me just knowing that program and knowing what's going on. This game's going to be really big for Ohio State. If Michigan wins it, I agree with you. I think it's going to throw a monkey wrench in the whole damn operation. It's going to be a big letdown for them folks up at Columbus. But I fully expect this Ohio State team to come out smoking. I think it's going to be a really tough environment for Michigan. And if they win this the way that I think they can, I think this Ohio State team can be really dangerous heading into playoffs.
Well, look, Hack, that changes the whole conversation, right? If Ohio State comes out and beats Michigan by 2 touchdowns or just boat races these boys, then all of a sudden, my opinion of Ohio State, right, I'm assuming that's going to be a hell of a football game offensively against a really good defense. It's, that's one of them you got to realize, you got to open your eyes to. All of a sudden, their strength of schedule and the way they dominated their most impressive opponent goes through the roof. I mean, so that changes the dynamic. And back to the question of being an elimination game, at that point in time, if Ohio State does that, then Michigan's assed out.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that the argument for 2 Big Ten teams is really tough to make because of the way that the Big Ten conference is structured with the East and West and the way that they've kind of loaded the East. It's really tough, and they've kind of handcuffed themselves. But there's for that, I think there's an argument for that, but I completely agree with you. It's in that fantasy of if ands and buts and all that other bullshit that no one really cares about, right? I think that there's a chance that happens, kind of like what Trevor was saying. There's a chance that Iowa, if they beat Nebraska and represents the West in the Big Ten championship, comes out and beats either of these motherfuckers, which ain't gonna happen. I think there's a shot, but I tend to agree with you. I think that this is going to be defining for both these programs moving forward. And I think from a college football playoff standpoint, it is an elimination game.
Oh, there's a chance, guys. I mean, there's definitely a damn every college football show that I've watched. It seems like everybody, they're starting to come around on TCU a little bit, but it seems like everybody minimizes what TCU is doing, and everybody wants to make sure before we go to break now, with that losing that Big Ten game, how come they're not going to be in the conversation? It's one of those. So Hack, you're spot on. I think it's going to be a conversation whether we like it or not. I think it's going to be that Michigan M is going to be in the conversation.
Yeah.
I think you made an interesting point, Hack, on the structure of the Big Ten and how it's detrimental to Michigan and Ohio State. Because if you look at the SEC, up until this year, in the college football playoff era, we've never had a conversation about anybody coming out of the East except Georgia. This is the first year where we're like, whoever wins in the Georgia-Tennessee game, if both teams win out from there on, now we'll have the discussion of SEC top phase himself out. And so you see a team coming up on the West, which is traditionally the more competitive side in Alabama, now LSU, right? So you're right, because there's Georgia sitting alone on one side, and what the West is in the SEC with Bama and LSU, you've never had that narrative. Whereas every single year, Michigan, Ohio State, that game is the conference championship.